Alfred Jodl was a senior German military officer, whose life followed the dramatic rise and fall of Germany through 2 world wars, ending with his role in the surrender of Nazi Germany and his execution for war crimes. Although he was not as publicly prominent as figures like Hitler or Göring, Jodl was one of the most important military staff officers in the Third Reich. His work behind the scenes shaped major decisions during the war, and his actions placed him at the very center of Germany's military strategy. His life story is tied closely to Germany's turbulent 20th century history, and understanding him helps explain how the Nazi regime was able to carry out its devastating campaigns across Europe. Alfred Josef Ferdinand Jodl was born on May 10, 1890, in Würzburg, a city in Bavaria. His family was part of the military class, and he grew up in an environment that valued discipline, duty, and loyalty to the state. His father was an officer, and this background made a military career seem natural from a young age. Jodl attended cadet schools, where he learned leadership, military theory, and the traditions of the German officer corps. These schools emphasized obedience and excellence, and Jodl thrived in that setting. By the time he graduated, he had already formed a strong belief that service to the nation through the army was the highest calling. Jodl entered the Bavarian army as an artillery officer in 1910. When World War I began in 1914, he served on both the Western and Eastern fronts. He fought in several difficult battles, was wounded in action, and earned decorations for bravery. The war left a strong mark on him, as it did for many German officers. Germany's defeat in 1918 shocked him, and like many in the military, he felt that politicians had betrayed the army by agreeing to the armistice and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. This belief helped shape the attitudes of many officers who later supported the rise of more extreme political movements in Germany. After the war, the German military was reduced sharply in size, but Jodl managed to remain part of the new force, the Reichswehr. Promotions were much slower in the smaller army, but Jodl built a reputation as a disciplined and intelligent officer, especially skilled in planning and staff work. Staff officers were responsible for translating broad military goals into concrete plans, making Jodl well-suited for Germany's future expansion under Adolf Hitler. Jodl was not initially a political figure, but he did support the idea of restoring Germany's strength, and believed that a strong government was needed to do so. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he began to rebuild and expand the military, ignoring the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles. For officers like Jodl, this offered new opportunities for advancement. Jodl rose steadily through the ranks because of his organizational skills and talent for planning complex operations. In 1935, he joined the newly created Wehrmacht, the unified armed forces of Nazi Germany. Over the next few years, he worked on military planning and training exercises, often focusing on strategy rather than direct battlefield command. His ability to understand and coordinate large-scale operations brought him to the attention of top leaders. In 1939, as Europe moved closer to war, Jodl was appointed to the Armed Forces High Command, known as the OKW. This organization served as the main headquarters for the German military and reported directly to Hitler. Jodl became the chief of the operations staff, one of the most important military positions in the entire regime. His job was to turn Hitler's increasingly ambitious and aggressive ideas into detailed strategic plans. Although Jodl sometimes disagreed privately with Hitler, he followed his decisions and helped implement them with precision. This placed Jodl in a powerful position and made him deeply involved in nearly every major German operation during World War II. At the start of the war, Jodl played a central role in planning the invasions of Poland, Denmark, Norway, France, and the Low Countries. These early victories gave Germany control over most of Europe and made Hitler believe his strategies were flawless. Jodl worked long hours, often without rest, producing detailed orders and coordinating between the Army, Navy, and Air Force. His work was highly valued, and Hitler trusted him as one of his most loyal and reliable staff officers. However, this loyalty also meant that Jodl supported or approved actions that violated international law, including harsh policies in occupied territories and the mistreatment of civilians and prisoners. One of the most significant campaigns Jodl helped plan was the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, known as Operation Barbarossa. This operation was the largest military invasion in history, involving millions of soldiers. Jodl and the OKW staff believed that the Soviet Union would collapse quickly, just as other nations had. However, the campaign turned into a long and brutal struggle. Germany had underestimated the harsh winter, the vast distances, and the determination of Soviet forces. As the war dragged on, Jodl helped direct operations on multiple fronts, often working under increasing pressure and dealing with devastating losses. As the war turned against Germany, Jodl struggled to balance military reality with Hitler's refusal to accept defeat. Hitler frequently interfered with military decisions, dismissed commanders, and ordered German troops to fight to the last man, even when withdrawal was the only logical choice. Jodl continued to issue these orders despite knowing they caused unnecessary suffering and loss of life. His loyalty to Hitler never wavered publicly, and he increasingly became a symbol of the obedient officer who followed orders regardless of the consequences. In July 1944, a group of German officers attempted to assassinate Hitler in the famous July 20 plot. Although Jodl was not involved, the event created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion within the German leadership. Jodl was injured slightly in the explosion but survived and continued his duties. After the failure of the assassination attempt, Hitler tightened his control even further, and Jodl remained by his side, supporting him until the very end of the war. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing on all fronts. The Allies were closing in from both east and west. Cities were destroyed, and millions of people had been killed. When Hitler committed suicide in April 1945, the new German government attempted to negotiate a surrender. Jodl was sent as the representative to the Allied headquarters in Reims, France. On May 7, 1945, he signed the unconditional surrender of all German forces, effectively ending the war in Europe. This was the last major act of his military career, and also the action that made him widely known to the world. After the war, Jodl was arrested by Allied forces and charged with war crimes at the Nuremberg trials. The charges included planning wars of aggression, approving brutal occupation policies, and issuing unlawful orders. Jodl defended himself by arguing that he was a soldier who simply followed the orders of his political leaders, and that he had never acted out of personal cruelty. However, the tribunal found that following orders was not an excuse for participating in criminal actions, especially at such a high level of command. He was convicted and sentenced to death. On October 16, 1946, Alfred Jodl was executed by hanging in Nuremberg. Jodl's legacy remains controversial. Some have tried to portray him as a professional soldier trapped in a system he could not control, while others point out that his loyalty and actions made the Nazi war machine far more effective. He was not a battlefield general, but rather a planner who helped coordinate Germany's military aggression and supported decisions that caused immense suffering. His involvement at the highest levels of the Nazi regime makes it impossible to separate his military career from the crimes committed by that government. Alfred Jodl's life is a powerful example of how skilled and intelligent individuals can become part of destructive systems when they place obedience and loyalty above moral responsibility. His career rose within a military culture that valued discipline over ethical judgment, and in the end, this allowed him to help carry out one of the most devastating wars in history. His actions, and the consequences he faced, serve as a reminder of the responsibility that comes with holding positions of power, especially in times of conflict.